The town doesn't trap people by accident. It doesn't wait for someone to take the wrong road. It doesn't simply react when a family gets lost. It chooses them long before they ever see the fallen tree. And if that's true, then every person who has ever entered the town was already marked. Their arrival wasn't the beginning of the story. It was the final step of a decision that had already been made. But here's what changes everything. What if the road isn't an entrance at all? What if it's only the last checkpoint in a process that began days, months, or even years earlier? Look at what the show is actually telling us. Every character believes they accidentally drove into the town. They remember a normal trip, a vacation, a business drive, a family visit. Then suddenly, the tree blocks the road, the crows appear, and everything changes. But nobody ever asks the most dangerous question. Why them? Out of millions of people driving every day, why does the town always choose those specific individuals? Why not the next car? Why not someone traveling the same highway an hour later? The show wants us to believe it's random. But nothing about From has ever been random. Every mystery in this series eventually reveals a hidden pattern. The bottles hanging from the trees. The dates carved inside the lighthouse. Victor's drawings. The music box. The talismans. At first they all seemed meaningless. Later we discovered they were pieces of a much larger design. So, why should the arrivals be any different? This is the detail everyone missed. The town never seems surprised when someone arrives. Think about that for a moment. The creatures don't act like unexpected visitors have wandered into their hunting ground. They behave like hosts waiting for invited guests. Night falls. The monsters come out. And somehow they already understand exactly how the game works. It's almost as if they've done this countless times before. Because maybe they have. And this is where it gets darker. Notice what happens emotionally before many characters reach the town. Jim and Tabitha's family is already falling apart after losing Thomas. Their grief has poisoned every conversation. They're traveling because they're trying to repair something that may already be beyond saving. Boyd is carrying years of military trauma while desperately trying to protect his family. Father Katri arrives carrying unbearable guilt over a tragedy he believes he failed to prevent. Sara hears voices even before anyone understands what those voices truly are. Jade enters the town obsessed with logic, convinced every problem has a rational solution. Different people, different lives, but strangely similar emotional conditions. Every one of them is already carrying something broken. That isn't coincidence. That's selection. The town isn't looking for healthy people. It's looking for unfinished people. People carrying guilt they can't escape. Fear they refuse to face. Loss they never accepted. Secrets they buried so deeply that even they pretend those secrets don't exist anymore. Because the town doesn't just feed on bodies. It feeds on fractures. Think about how every resident slowly becomes trapped in psychological loops instead of simply trying to survive. Boyd becomes consumed by responsibility. Tabitha becomes obsessed with finding answers underground. Jade loses himself chasing impossible symbols. Victor never emotionally grows beyond the child who first watched everyone die. The town doesn't create these obsessions. It amplifies them. Like a machine designed to find emotional weaknesses and slowly turn them into prisons. That's not the real mystery. The real mystery is how the town already knows where those weaknesses are, because it acts with terrifying precision. When Boyd starts believing he understands the rules, the town changes them. When Tabitha discovers a possible escape, reality twists again. When Jade gets close to solving the symbols, new visions appear. Every breakthrough is met with a perfectly timed psychological attack, almost as if something has been studying them, learning them, preparing for them. That shouldn't be possible, unless the study began before they ever arrived. Go back to Victor. Victor has spent decades inside this nightmare, longer than anyone else. He repeatedly says the town makes people forget. It changes memories. It hides things people aren't ready to remember. Most viewers assume this only happens after someone enters the town. But the show never actually says that. What if memory manipulation starts earlier? What if people begin forgetting before they even reach the tree? Suddenly, the biggest mystery in the series becomes something entirely different. Maybe nobody remembers being chosen. Maybe that memory is taken away first. Because if people knew they were being hunted before arriving, they would never continue driving. The town would lose control. Instead, everyone believes the same comforting lie. We got lost.
No.
They didn't get lost. They were delivered. And look closely at the symbolism of the fallen tree itself. Most viewers see it as a roadblock. But symbolically, a fallen tree has always represented the end of one life and the beginning of another. Once the characters see it, there is no real decision left to make. Turning around doesn't save them. Every direction leads back to the town. That's because the choice wasn't made at the tree. The choice had already been made somewhere else. Earlier. Somewhere none of them can remember. But if that's true, then someone or something had to know exactly who they were before they ever arrived. And once you accept that possibility, every accident in from stops looking like fate. It starts looking like a carefully planned collection. But if the town is collecting people instead of trapping them, then one question becomes impossible to ignore. How does it know who to choose? This is where almost every theory stops. They assume the town reacts after people arrive. But the evidence suggests the exact opposite. The town behaves like it already has a file on every new resident. Look at what happens whenever someone new enters the town. The reactions are strangely controlled. People panic because they've been through it before. Boyd gives the same warnings. Donna follows the same routine. The monsters wait for night. It feels almost ceremonial, as if everyone, human and creature alike, is participating in a process that has happened hundreds of times. But here's what changes everything. The newcomers are never random combinations of people. They almost always bring emotional baggage that connects to the deeper themes of the town. Jim and Tabitha arrive with a marriage hanging by a thread after the death of Thomas. Ethan enters as a child whose imagination blurs the line between fantasy and reality. Julie is caught between childhood and adulthood, carrying resentment she barely understands. The town didn't just receive a family. It received grief, guilt, innocence, conflict, and hope, all in one vehicle. That sounds less like coincidence and more like a carefully selected psychological experiment. Now think about Jade. On the surface, he seems like the least likely victim. Successful, brilliant, confident. He believes every mystery can be solved with logic. But the town doesn't break him physically. It attacks the very thing that defines him. It floods his mind with impossible symbols, hallucinations, and visions that refuse to obey logic. Every answer creates 3 new questions. Every pattern collapses into another mystery. The town isn't trying to kill Jade. It's trying to force him to abandon certainty. That is an incredibly specific attack. And this is where it gets darker. Look at Boyd. Every major decision Boyd makes is about protecting other people. His identity depends on being the one who saves everyone else. So what does the town do? It places impossible choices in front of him. Save one person or another. Risk everyone to rescue someone. Carry worms beneath his skin. Watch people die despite doing everything right. Again and again, Boyd is forced to confront the possibility that he cannot save everyone. The town doesn't invent his fear. It weaponizes it. Now compare that to Tabitha. She refuses to stop searching. She digs beneath the house. She climbs the lighthouse. She follows impossible clues that no one else believes. Most viewers see this as courage. But maybe the town expected exactly that. Think carefully. Every discovery Tabitha makes leads her deeper into the mystery, not closer to freedom. It's almost like someone keeps placing breadcrumbs in front of her. Not enough to escape. Just enough to keep moving. Because hope is a far more effective prison than despair. Someone who has lost hope eventually gives up. Someone who believes the next clue will finally explain everything keeps walking exactly where they're supposed to go. Look at what the show is actually telling us. Every major character is pulled by something uniquely personal. Victor follows memories. Jade follows symbols. Boyd follows responsibility. Tabitha follows answers. Sara follows voices. Randall follows suspicion. None of them are chasing the same thing. Yet all of them keep moving exactly where the town needs them. That shouldn't be possible unless the town understands every one of them individually. This is the detail everyone missed. The monsters themselves rarely rush.
Why?
If their only goal were food, they would sprint. Instead, they smile. They speak calmly. They learn names. They imitate loved ones. They tempt people into making emotional decisions. That isn't hunting. That's profiling. A predator that simply wants to eat doesn't need to understand its prey. A predator that wants to control its prey does. And suddenly the monsters begin to resemble something far more terrifying. Not soldiers. Not demons. Collectors. Each encounter feels like another psychological test. Who opens the window? Who trusts the familiar voice? Who sacrifices someone else? Who breaks first? It's almost as though every resident is constantly being evaluated. Then remember Victor's drawings. People often assume they're just memories. But Victor doesn't simply draw events. He records people, faces, objects, places, moments that seem disconnected until years later. What if Victor has unknowingly been documenting the town's selection process? Children often notice patterns adults ignore. Victor survived because he adapted to the rules before anyone else understood they existed. His drawings may not predict the future. They may reveal the structure behind the cycle. And if that's true, then those drawings aren't memories of random tragedies. They're evidence that every arrival follows the same invisible design. Now the lighthouse becomes even stranger. Why are names and dates carved into its walls? Most theories assume they're records of previous victims. But what if there's something else entirely? What if those dates don't mark when people died? What if they mark when they were chosen? That would explain why time feels broken inside the town. Because the process doesn't begin at the tree. It begins long before anyone realizes they're part of the story. And once the town chooses someone, escape may never have been an option. Because the road doesn't lead people into the town. It simply delivers people who have already belonged to it for much longer than they could ever remember. Which raises a terrifying possibility. If every resident was selected years before arriving, then somewhere outside the town, people who haven't even seen the fallen tree yet may already be living the final normal days of their lives, without realizing they've already been chosen. But if people are chosen before they arrive, then we've been asking the wrong question since the very first episode. The question isn't, how do they escape? The real question is, why does the town need these specific people? Because selection only makes sense if there is a purpose behind it. And this is where it gets darker. Throughout the series, every major character changes in a way that feels strangely intentional. Not simply because they're surviving a nightmare, but because the town keeps forcing them into the exact emotional conflict they've spent their lives avoiding. Boyd is forced to accept that leadership cannot save everyone. Tabitha is forced to choose between impossible truths instead of comforting answers. Jim slowly loses his belief that reason alone can protect his family. Jade discovers that intelligence means nothing in a place where reality itself refuses to follow rules. Sara is pushed to question whether the voices are manipulating her or revealing something no one else can hear. Victor is trapped inside memories because the town seems determined to keep him connected to its past. Notice the pattern. Each character arrives with a defining weakness. Each weakness becomes the center of their journey. Each journey pushes them toward a breaking point. That isn't random storytelling. It's a system. Look at what the show is actually telling us. The town rarely destroys people immediately. Instead, it reshapes them. Sometimes slowly. Sometimes brutally, but always with incredible precision. This is the detail everyone missed. Every time someone thinks they've found certainty, the town removes it. The monsters stop following expected behavior. New visions appear. Old rules suddenly fail. Hope becomes dangerous. Fear becomes useful. Nothing stays stable for long.
Why?
Because certainty ends growth. Confusion creates transformation. If the town is trying to change people, then uncertainty is its greatest weapon. Think about Ethan. From the beginning, he has viewed the town differently than everyone else. Adults see horror. Ethan sees stories, quests, heroes, and monsters. Most viewers assume that's because he's a child. But what if children are actually better at seeing the truth? Ethan doesn't constantly fight the impossible. He accepts that impossible things exist. Victor does the same. Both of them survive by adapting instead of resisting. That connection feels too important to ignore. Maybe the town isn't interested in intelligence or strength. Maybe it's searching for imagination, or belief, or the ability to perceive realities adults refuse to acknowledge. Suddenly, Victor's survival across decades doesn't seem like luck. It seems like purpose. The town kept him alive because he still serves a function, not as a prisoner, as a witness. Someone who carries fragments of previous cycles into the next one. And what if every cycle requires someone like Victor? Someone who remembers just enough to guide the next group, but never enough to end the cycle completely. That would explain why the truth always feels within reach, but never fully revealed. The town doesn't want complete ignorance. It wants controlled understanding. Enough knowledge to keep people moving. Never enough to truly escape. But here's what changes everything. What if the monsters aren't the ones making these decisions? Think about it. The creatures hunt. They manipulate. They terrify. But do they ever seem like they're in charge? Not really. They behave more like employees following instructions than rulers controlling the town. Whenever larger mysteries appear, the lighthouse, the strange voices, the symbols, the music, the visions, it feels like something much older is operating behind them. The monsters may simply be one tool among many. If that's true, then the real intelligence behind the town has remained almost completely invisible. And that's exactly what makes it terrifying. Because an unseen force that can choose people years in advance, study their deepest emotional wounds, guide them toward specific decisions, manipulate memories, shape reality, and maintain the same cycle across generations, isn't merely hunting, it's cultivating. The residents aren't random victims. They're carefully selected pieces in an experiment that has been running for decades, perhaps centuries. Every arrival is another move. Every death changes the board. Every survivor carries information into the next phase. The town doesn't need everyone to live. It doesn't need everyone to die. It only needs the cycle to continue. And suddenly, the fallen tree means something completely different. It isn't a trap. It isn't even a warning. It's a receipt. Proof that the selection process is over. By the time someone sees that tree, every important decision has already been made. Not by them, by the town. Which leads to one final possibility that could completely redefine from Season 4. What if someone we've never suspected isn't going to be chosen next? Because they've already been chosen for years, and they simply haven't reached the tree yet? If that theory is true, then somewhere outside the town, another future resident is living an ordinary day, believing their life is completely normal, without realizing that the town already knows their name. And if the town has been choosing people before they arrive all along, then maybe the most terrifying part of From isn't that no one can leave. It's that no one was ever truly free to begin with. Because once the town chooses you, the journey has already started, even if you haven't seen the road yet. So here's the question that could change everything in Season 4. If the town decides who enters, who, or what, is making the choice.